All right, welcome back to a fresh perspective. Willkommen, kommen Sie. Thanks for hanging with me. Appreciate all of my listeners. And in this segment, I'm going to talk about a little something going on in Virginia, which has kind of been a ground zero of sorts when it comes to the debate over transing children and the problematic stuff that they're trying to teach in K through 12 classrooms. It's where a lot of the protest has taken place. I mean, it's been going on all over the country, but the issue was pretty egregious when it comes to Loudoun County, Virginia. And as you know, Republican was elected governor Glenn Youngkin back in November of last year, and he's been following through on his promises to deal with these issues, to stop these school districts from trying to indoctrinate children into far leftist progressive, so-called progressive ideology when it comes to issues like race or sexuality or gender identity. And so he has been implementing some policy in that regard. And of course, the Democrats in the state aren't too happy about it. It's funny, I actually just got done talking about this on Victory News. You should check out my appearances there. I'll put them up on my YouTube channel, I suppose. But I saw this story yesterday. It was actually sent to me by Ian Pryor, who is a senior advisor for America First Legal. He's also part of a group called Citizens for Sanity. This guy wears a lot of hats, but he sent me the story. And you know what? I wasn't surprised by it. As a matter of fact, I've been warning about it over the past more than a year or so. And now they're making another push for this. So let's get into the story. Let's get into this. And I actually wrote an article about this on redstate.com. And it's not even in behind the paywall, so you can go and read it at your leisure. But you still should, subscribe to Red State because you can read all my VIP articles where I put my deepest, most innermost, intimate thoughts. Anyway, all right, I'll stop goofing off. So a Virginia lawmaker, she's part of the House of Delegates, which is, I guess, kind of like their House of Representatives. Her name is Elizabeth Guzman. And if she gets her way, parents who do not affirm their child's sexual orientation or gender identity, like if they're dealing with gender dysphoria, if they do not affirm these things to the extent that she wants them to, they could face felony or misdemeanor charges if this woman gets her way. Now, Elizabeth Guzman is a social worker, but she's also a part of the legislature, the state legislature. And she reintroduced a bill, because she did this in 2020 the first time, and it didn't go anywhere, but she's trying again. And this bill is ostensibly designed to protect LGBTQ children from their evil parents who may not affirm their choices when it comes, again, to their sexuality and gender identity. Here's what the measure would do. It would expand the state's definition of child abuse to include parents who are not in alignment with progressive viewpoints on these matters, sexuality, gender identity. So she had an interview with ABC 7 News, a local news affiliate, and she said, quote, "If the child shares with those mandated reporters what they are going through, we are talking about not only physical abuse or mental abuse. What the job of that mandated reporter is to inform Child Protective Services." Right? We just had some whack job left-wing media activists try to call CPS on a candidate running for office in a different state, I believe, because she was supposedly teaching her child how to be a racist because she said Happy Columbus Day. We already know that these people want to use the government against parents who don't deal with their children the way the government says they should. Now, Guzman continued. She says, quote, and then that's how everybody gets involved. There's also an investigation in place that is not only from a social worker, but there's also a police investigation before we make the decision that there is going to be a CPS charge. So what she wants to do is make it easier for these school districts to enforce their ideology, not just on the child, but also on the parents. Because right now the school districts can't do anything to the parents. Now they can lie to them. They can help their children transition to the opposite gender, supposedly, because that's not possible. But they can do this without the parents' knowledge. If the kid says that they don't want their parents to know, they won't tell them. And they'll even lie to them. They'll use the kid's birth name and birth pronouns in front of the parents, and then once the parents are gone, they'll use the child's chosen name and chosen pronouns. So there's a lot of deception involved here. But this bill, if passed, would give them even more teeth, because they can say, oh, well, parent, you're not affirming your kid's gender ideology or your kid's chosen gender. It looks like you're going to get a visit from CPS and the police, right? That's what this is intended to do. Now, when Guzman was asked what the penalties would be if the authorities determined that a parent is not affirming enough of their LGBTQ child, that's when Guzman said that it could be a felony or a misdemeanor. So she said, quote, well, we first have to complete an investigation. It could be a felony, it could be a misdemeanor, but we know that CPS could harm your employment, could harm their education, because nowadays many people do a CPS database search before offering employment. Now then, I don't think that these are the only consequences that she wants, but this is bad enough, isn't it? That you would harm somebody's ability to get an education or employment because they don't believe in the LGBTQ ideas that the progressives want them to believe in. But it's none of their business, right? I'll get to that in a second. Let's just keep going through the story. And you guys already know how I feel about it, but I'll lay it out a little bit better. The interviewer also asked this state delegate about critics who say that this bill would essentially criminalize parents. And the reporter asked how she would respond to that criticism. She said, quote, no, it's not. It's educating parents because the law tells you the do's and don'ts. So this law is telling you do not abuse your children because they are LGBTQ. Now here's the thing. Virginia already has laws on the books to prevent child abuse. So regardless of the reason as to why you're abusing your child, you can still be prosecuted. The authorities will still deal with you, which they should, if you're actually abusing your child. But again, what Guzman is trying to do here is expand the definition of the term child abuse to include things that aren't necessarily abuse. But this isn't about abuse. This is, again, about progressives enforcing their ideology. See, they don't work through persuasion, right? We know this. Progressives, the hard left, does not try to get their way through persuasion, through having conversations, because they know their ideas suck. So they have to do it through force. That's why they're all about censorship. That's why they're okay with the fact that the Biden administration is working with companies to suppress conservative views online. It's why they shout down speakers on college campuses who don't agree with them. It's why they try to cancel anybody who expresses a point of view that they don't like. And it's also why they want to use the government as much as they possibly can to force their ideas on the rest of the nation. And this is just yet another attempt to do that. Now, the reporter also brought up the First Amendment protections related to religious freedom, right? Congress shall not pass any laws infringing on the right to practice one's religion, right? Here was her response to that. This isn't funny. I'm not laughing because it's funny, but here's her response. The Bible, she says, quote, okay. Quote, the Bible says to accept everyone for who they are. So that's what I tell people when they ask me that question. And that's what I will continue to tell people. You know, we all have a commitment to God, and for those believers out there, we know that there's life after life, and there's going to be a conversation between that person and God, and that's what we're after, to go by what the Bible says. It is not my job to judge anyone. It is my job to help people and to possibly threaten them with jail time and not being able to get employment if they don't do what I say. Okay, I may or may not have added that last part. But the rest, she actually said this. Tell me that you don't read the Bible without telling me that you don't read the Bible. That's what she's doing here. I mean, and if you're a Christian and you're listening to this, you already know the counter to this argument, right? Yes, you do. God calls us to love people. That doesn't mean that we have to accept everything that they do, right? I mean, there's nowhere in the Bible where it says that. And there's definitely nothing in the Bible that says you should be threatening people with the police because they don't raise their kids the way you want them to. Again, there's a difference between abuse and what we're actually talking about here. Now, I actually pulled up the law itself, and I pulled up the passage that she wants to add, because it goes through all the different criteria that defines what child abuse is under Virginia law. And so what she would do is, this is what she would be adding on. It would define the term as behavior that, quote, creates or inflicts, threatens to create or inflict, or allows to be created or inflicted upon such child a physical or mental injury on the basis of the child's gender identity or sexual orientation. But again, if you read that law, it already disallows this. You cannot abuse your child in Virginia. There are laws against that, regardless of the reason why you're doing it. But again, she's expanding the definition because she wants to include parents that aren't necessarily abusing their kids, but they're not. But if they have a daughter named Sally, they don't approve of him or of her saying, "Okay, now my name is Sam," and I don't mean Samantha. I mean like Samuel, the dude's name. Yeah. All right. So here now. Obviously, there are people taking issue with this, and I reached out to a few different people. Nicole Neely, president of Parents Defending Education, which is a great organization to support. It's a parental rights advocacy group, and they have filed a bunch of lawsuits against a lot of this stuff that's being taught in schools, whether it's on race or sexuality or gender identity. And they've been winning, actually. So they're doing very good work. So I spoke with Nicole Neely, who I've actually had on this podcast twice now. You can check those out on my YouTube channel. Same name, A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles. And she told me, quote, regardless of what Delegate Guzman may believe, Virginia parents have a fundamental right to direct the upbringing of their children, and we have no intention of surrendering those rights to her or any other education bureaucrat. I have a feeling that she may have wanted to say something else there, but she, you got to be, politically correct. She's got to be diplomatic. But she's right. She's right. This is nothing more than trying to interfere with the way parents raise their children. So that shouldn't be surrendered. And that's the thing. And that's really what this is about. This is about parental rights. And I'll get to that in a second. I also spoke with Ian Pryor, the person who sent me the story. Again, he's a senior advisor at America First Legal. I've had him on my program twice. Check that out on my YouTube channel. This guy, the stuff that he brings up is stuff that, that we need to know about. I'll say that. And he said, quote, as shocking and evil as this is, it is not surprising. Schools in Virginia are keeping parents out of the loop when their children tell staff that they want to identify as a different sex. The very reason schools are doing this is because they believe that parents' failure to affirm is abuse, and that is the crux of the matter. See, to these people, abuse isn't slapping your kid, punching your kid, verbally abusing them, calling them all kinds of names, tearing them down every day. They don't believe that that's all that child abuse is, and of course there's more to it than that. I'm not trying to, downplay child abuse here. That's not what's going on. But they believe that if you don't think that your daughter named Myra should become Manny, that's abuse right there. That alone is abuse, even if you're still loving on your kid. And I've talked to mothers who have gone through this. Gabrielle Clark. Her daughter's school tried to pull this crap on her, tried to encourage her to believe that she was really a boy, and Gabby had to go through a whole process to get her out of that, and she ended up having to move to a different state. And now she's a big activist on this stuff. She was just in Anaheim protesting, and she's very active on social media. And guess what Twitter did today? They suspended her account. Again, progressives don't work by persuasion because their ideas suck. They go through force. But I digress. Ian Pryor also said that this bill is a natural progression from what the woke left is pushing. And he said, make no mistake, they will lose this fight. Politicians that push it will be defeated. Organizations that try to separate children from caring parents will be prosecuted and sued. The sick and twisted agenda of these activists will be a relic of the past, and they will join the ranks of history's villains. And he's right. But even if we're looking at the here and now, Guzman's bill is not going to get passed. It's just not going to happen. She's going to lose, and she probably knows it. Even Democrats have come out against it. Representative Abigail Spanberger, and I'll give you a little bit of tea on her. She's a Democrat, and she said this bill will be dead in the water. She didn't agree with it. She didn't think that this was a good idea. But one of her surrogates, and I wrote about this too the other day, just the other day I wrote about this. One of her surrogates was at a meeting at somebody's home and said the quiet part out loud and said that he believes that children whose parents don't affirm their gender identity should be removed from the home. They want to take your kids away, guys. I'm not exaggerating. He actually said this. These people want to remove your children. But why? Because it's a fundamental difference in thinking between progressives and sane people. And I specifically say progressives because I think that most people who vote Democrat would agree with you and I on this. They would. See, the thing is, these people, again, they don't think your kids belong to you. They believe that your children should belong to the state. And you're just caretakers. That's what if they had their way, if they could wave a magic wand and have their way tomorrow, that is exactly what society would look like. The government would be raising your children. And you can kind of just be a caretaker, but you have to do it the way they tell you to do it. Otherwise, they'll throw you in jail or they will send CPS to your home. It's evil. It is nothing less than wicked. But this is why I talk about this so much. I mean, don't think that I don't get sick of talking about this. The only I'll walk that back. I don't get sick of talking about it because it's too important. But don't think that I like having to talk about this in the first place. I should be able to talk about policy and other stuff, immigration. And I do, but I talk about this issue so much because it is that important. Like I've always said, like I said on the last episode, this is one of the biggest issues that the country is facing that nobody knows about. So I'm trying to do my part to expose it as much as possible. And there are other people doing it too. Brandon Showalter at the Christian Post. Him and I became friends recently over this issue. He's been on my podcast twice. I met him in person a few weeks ago here in Austin. But there are a lot of other people who are pushing back against this because this isn't just about transing the kids, although that's bad enough. This is about what they want their end goal. To control as much as your life as possible, to control your parenting. Imagine that. That is what these people want. So yes, this bill is going to get slapped down. Yes, sure. But we should not assume that this is not going to come back. Because it is. This is the end goal of what they want. If anything, we can look at this as a test run. Because again, she knows that this bill is not going to pass. And they are bent on pushing their gender ideology on the rest of the public, regardless of how we feel about it. If they have to threaten you with criminal penalties or use the state to kidnap your children, because that is what they would be doing, then so be it. This is yet another reason why we have to squash this crap as soon as possible. We've got to squash it in the culture, in society, at the with legislation. We need a full court press on this Because if we don't, we're going to have even more casualties. And we've already got enough as it is. And we're going to see more of these in the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. We're going to see more people who got transitioned that want to go back. And we're going to even see people, and I hate to say it, who may have committed suicide because they took puberty blockers, or women or girls who got their breasts cut off at 12, 13 years old because they thought that would fix their mental health. I could go on about this, but I'll leave it right there for right now. Give us a second. I'm going to pay some bills, and I will be right back.